Hello everybody online. Don't know how many there are, but we're giving it another go tonight. So, welcome. Here we are, April, Canterbury Tech. Again. Oh, a junior member up the back there. That's good. We're starting them young. Good to see. How old's that one? 6 months? Half. Yeah, right, 6 months. Good. Got to start them early. We've got to start talking to those young people and get them considering careers in tech, haven't we?
Especially the girls. So that's good.
Yeah, good. Especially the girls. I don't think we've been at Epic for quite some time, have we? So nice to be back here. So what are we doing this evening? You get the dubious pleasure of hearing from me. Oh, I always forget that bit. I think everybody knows Neil, but you don't, of course. Not all of you have had the pleasure of meeting me yet, so come and say hi later on. I'm Neil Hamilton. I'm General Manager of Canterbury Tech, which is about all you need to know, really. We have, I think Casey's going to do a quick pitch from AWS, and you two stand up, please. These two gents from AWS have kindly sponsored this evening, so you give thanks for your beer. Thank you, Casey. Casey and Gordon. And anybody else that fancies sponsoring one of these things, we're a not-for-profit, right? So everything that gets sponsored means there's more dollars to go into other things. So thanks to AWS. Hear from me a little bit from Casey. Then we've got Dylan, who's in the front row here, talking about computing, let me try that again, coding and computing blind. And Chandra Harrison, digital accessibility. A little bit more networking, drink more beer, eat what's left of the food, probably not much by now, and wrap up. But before I go any further...
Has somebody locked their e-bike to one of those things? Can you... Sorry.
Oh no, e-bike's locked to the wrong thing. Before I go any further, I better do the compulsory health and safety briefing. It says compulsory here, so it's obviously important. Welcome to Epic. Thank you very much to Epic for allowing us to host here. Hope everybody's scanned the QR code for, yeah, you guessed it, the COVID app. If not, please do so. Fire or any other need to get out the building, there's exits on all four walls. Around that end of the corridor, that one, yep, it's kind of shape of a cross, so there's no shortage of exits. It is a really safe building. Look at how much timber is in this place. It wobbles a bit, I know, but it doesn't fall down. So if there is an earthquake, it's safer to remain inside the building and take cover under desks and tables. We do have first aiders on site. If you have a need, let us know, let the people at the desk know. We've got at least 2 first aiders amongst the team. And 2 sets of toilets, one down that way, one up this way. Okay, that's my obligations done there. More thanks to AWS. How thankful can one person be? But we are, look, I'll make no bones about the fact we're looking to deepen our relationship with AWS and try and get them on the hook to be involved in Tech Summit this year. No pressure, you do.
It's in the works, don't worry.
Excellent. Also to Epic, I think we used to hold events here more frequently. It has been a little while, but you know, there's obviously a lot of tech companies under this roof and nearby, so it's useful for us to be here from time to time. So what's Canterbury Tech got going on? Our mentoring programs are about to launch, and just to make life a little more complicated, this year we're doing 3 of them. Career Start. It's really about people that are students moving into their first job in tech, or people that are new to Christchurch and need a little help to get oriented as to how this place works and where the jobs might be. Career Start, first one off the rank. Mid-career is often, but not wholly, not always, about people making some sort of change to their career. It might be moving from a development role into a product management role, for example. Might be going from a BA to a project manager, or it might just be looking for a mentor to get some more technical mentoring and grow their technical ability. So that's for people that have been in the sector for, we're not too fussy about how long, but it's, say, a couple of years at least. And then late career is a new addition. Where's Ian? I saw you sneaking up the back here. Ian's one of our volunteers that makes the mentoring programs tick. Thank you so much for your efforts over the last couple of years. It is largely run by volunteers with me supporting fairly badly in the background. It really works though. I mean, our mentoring programs are short in duration. They're 3 months. We're reasonably careful with our mentor and mentee matching. Take a look, give it a go. So the late career one, you know, there might be people, where did it come from? It came from, we've had some people such as Ian move into retirement out of being employed by the tech sector, and yet, you know, these people have some extremely valuable skills. So one of the ways that we use the late career program is to help them understand how they can give back and how they can continue to be affiliated with the tech sector locally, and we get the benefit of their wisdom. So keep an eye out for these 3 distinct programs. If you're unclear about which might be appropriate for you, there is an email address, which I think is mentorprogram@canterburytech.nz. Might be wrong, but probably is. Merch! Who wants merch? Everybody wants merch. Look at these amazing t-shirts. You can't have a black one because the black ones mean we're important people with Canterbury Tech. No. What they're about is, you know, at Tech Summit, for example, we say, if you need some help with anything, go and see people wearing a black Canterbury Tech t-shirt. So you can't buy a black one. That's that. But go and have a look. They're actually very reasonably priced. And we might expand the range if there's the interest. Sponsorship, give us your money, like AWS, take their lead. I mean, what can I say? So you can sponsor a monthly event like this. Basically, you're paying to be associated with a specific monthly event and to defer the costs of running these things. We do have the concept of being an annual sponsor for Canterbury Tech, and that's these people, companies down the bottom. They stump up, usually it's cash, sometimes it's in kind. They support what we do throughout a 12-month period. And then of course you can sponsor Tech Summit as well. People sponsor Tech Summit for various reasons. Sometimes it's to get employer profile and branding. Other times it's perhaps to find customers. Other sponsors just want to be associated with Canterbury Tech because it's such an amazing event. There are multiple ways for us to take your money, so if you have any interest in supporting our activities, please get in touch. I'm not difficult to find. Or talk to us today, even better. So we do have a bunch of new members. I'm not going to go through all of them. I get criticised for not mentioning students all by name, but I think we've got 16, at least 16 new student members this month. 3 individuals and Ravensdown have joined up in Traction Marketing. Who's new? Who's new to these things? Oh, rubbish. Oh.
You've listed it, so I can...
Okay, our fault. Oh, I see. It's our fault. But look, if you're new to Canterbury Tech, stick your hands up again. Stick your hands up. People, take note. Go and talk to these people, make them feel welcome, find out why they're here, and just get talking to them. Chris, seen you before. Definitely not a first timer. So a little bit about Tech Summit, and obviously I put this slide together because it's really bad compared to the others. Debbie does a great job and I don't, so I whacked this one together. It is going to be at UC Student Association building. It will accommodate 400 to 550 people. It's a new venue for us. Thursday the 2nd of September, full day, put it in your diary now. I don't see many people with phones. So,
What tickets?
Yeah, you can't buy tickets yet, but soon we'll take your money there too. 2 concurrent streams, one broadly more technical in nature, one more businessy in nature. Look, I'm interested to hear from anyone who has some great ideas for speakers. I've got a big long list of people to approach. The first 2 that I've confirmed are, well, Sequent's very topical. Anybody not heard of Sequent? Have you been living in a cave for the last 2 months, perhaps? No? Okay, everybody has heard. That's good. I think our first $1 billion in US local company. Well, yeah, once upon a time, Telogis wasn't quite $1 billion.
It wasn't, according to Braille.
Yeah, well, it was kept quiet actually. At least Sequent have been very.
First one in the newspaper.
Sequent's been very public about what the transaction has been worth. So Sean, CEO of Sequent, and my friend and Dan, where's Dan? He's somewhere in there. There's Dan Fowley, the other co-founder of Trinio. Abhinav's the CEO these days. He and Dan started the company locally in Christchurch. Abhinav's been in Boulder in Colorado for the last 6, is it 6 now? 7, is it? 7 years. And he's returning to Christchurch in a few weeks' time. So they're the first 2. Abhinav's a really great conference speaker, and I had a chat with him this morning about subject matter. So there you go, there's the date, rough format, 2 concurrent streams, a couple of speakers to get you interested. It's going to be great, as ever, and lots of opportunity for networking. It's a good venue for networking, and we've created lots of space within the program, time within the program for networking, which is what those who went last year told us you wanted. So that's what you're getting, no complaints. Good, next. Oh, right, Tech Week. Graham, where's Graham? There he is. Graham Muller is the CEO of NZ Tech, and Canterbury Tech is the local coordinator for Tech Week. I'm going to attempt to play this video. We tested the audio earlier, so here's a... So there's your teaser. Last week in May, I think it is. It's going round again, it's so good. So get involved. There will be events on locally. There'll be a whole lot of stuff going on online as well. Some really good things, and still not too late to get more events into the program. I think there's another 2 weeks or something before it closes off. So this is one that we, Canterbury Tech, are running during Tech Week. Last year we ran something which we also called Pathways to Tech, and that was aimed at school-age students, where we had 3 young local tech professionals talking about what they did, basically what their companies do, how they got into those jobs, why they enjoy it. This year we're going to talk about tech startups and entrepreneurship, and we will have hopefully 4 young tech entrepreneurs talking about their companies, how they got going, and why, again, school-age students might want to consider that, and some of the support that's available locally, such as Young Enterprise Scheme, what goes on down at Te Ohaka, Ministry of Awesome, and within the University of Canterbury Centre for Entrepreneurship as well. So if you've got kids, you might want to push them towards taking a look at this. Should be a fun late afternoon, early evening. This is running at the moment. To be honest, I haven't looked into it too much, but Ryan Energy Accelerator, Ministry of Awesome, take a look. And another event that I haven't followed the web link yet, but the local Aotearoa Christchurch Economic Recovery and Labour Market event, that's the long title, but Wednesday the 28th, Limes Room. Here's some other things. The Christchurch launch of the NZ Health IT Opportunities Report. I think that was launched last week or the week before, recently anyway. So there's a local event in a couple of days at Web Tools. And there's some others there, the AI Summit in Auckland in May. And the High Tech Awards Gala dinner is always a good night out. Unfortunately, it means getting on a plane this year because it's in Auckland, but I'll be doing so given I'm a trustee. I think last I heard we'd sold 950 tickets or something, so it's a big bash. It's a fun night out. And we've got 2 of our local tech companies as finalists for the High Tech Company of the Year. Delighted to see that, and a couple of others in the mix in other categories too. Ta-da, that's my bit. You're tired of hearing me? I'm going to do a very basic... Talk into this, Casey.
Hello. Oh, I get to be very close to you. Oh.
That's all right. I don't smell too much.
So the first part I was going to introduce you to myself and Gordon, but that's already been done. Thanks for that. True professional. So yeah, we're a local team on the ground. So Gordon and I in Christchurch and the South Island pretty much every Tuesday and Wednesday. So, you know, we're definitely here to actually meet you guys in person. The other one is also mainly, like, I'm very passionate about the community piece, so I'm doing work for the University of Canterbury, and the first thing I'm about is to relaunch the Canterbury AWS user group. So that is going to ideally, you know, this late May or early June, going to do just a meet and greet with some content there, and then moving it more towards a quarterly or half-yearly event that will have a theme. And then you'll probably get sick and tired of me because I'll be in between that doing presentations at all of the other meetup groups if they let me. If you have a meetup group, please call me. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Casey. Did I mention they sponsored this evening? Did I mention that? Yeah. Good people.
If you're nice to us, we might sponsor more.
We'll try. We got good beer. So let me reach for my bit of paper, which I have misplaced. There's my bit of paper. So next up in the front row here we've got Dylan Watts, and I'll reach for my script because I'm not very good at memorising these things, and I'm not going to read it all, but Dylan sounds like a pretty amazing guy. and modest too. I like it. Dylan's a software engineer who just happens to be blind, is my take. And he's here to tell us a bit of his story. So, Dylan, can I invite you up here?
Jeremy's going to do an intro.
Okay,
That's all right.
do that.
Got
Drew,
Dylan as well. Get Dylan up here as well.
let's do that. Do a very basic.
Yeah.
Here we go.
All right. I'll stand to you. All right. Hey, I'm Drew. I'm from Gym Master, and we work upstairs. I'm a coder with Dylan, and I hired him originally. One of the things that stood out when he applied was his covering letter. He was quite funny and interviewed well. He's a good coder, and he's been with us for about 5 years. I just wanted to say that we haven't really made any special allowances because he's blind. He's had to cope, be what may, in the office, in spite of us. Yep. And he's a really valuable member of our team, and he's really good with clients, and does pretty much everything. So
How did you go in the Nerf Wars upstairs?
shit aim, and and he doesn't come like when we do like paintball every year. He doesn't come. I don't know why. Like, yeah.
Thanks, Drew. I'll tell you what, I will just clip this onto your zip there, and I'll push that in the pocket. You okay with that?
Yep, cool.
Okay. Away you go. The podium's right in front of you. Otherwise,
Okay.
over to you.
Hi, everybody. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Cool, I guess. You know that feeling when you're in an exam and you realize you should have studied more? It turns out that's not restricted to exams. It applies even more intensely in public speaking engagements. I sort of want to talk about 3 things. So the first sort of thing is how I program. The second is how you should program. And then the third is just a random hodgepodge of nonsense, like upcoming technologies and stuff that interests me. So I was born 16 weeks early, and I wouldn't recommend it. As a result of that, I got given a lot of oxygen to keep me alive, and it ended up making my retinas become detached, so they're very cold and emotionally unsympathetic, and they also don't work. So you can, if it helps, compare my eyes to the brain of the average iMac user.
Tracner is a Linux shop, just
Yeah.
putting it out there. Anyone who can't do command line is lower.
It's how the rest of the world works too, they just don't know it. So people used to ask me all the time, how do you program? And I would give the answer that we all sort of give, which is you Google around for a bit and find a programming language you don't like and hate everyone who uses anything different. And it took a long time until one day a lecturer in computer science asked me that question, and I said, well, shit, shouldn't you know? And it turns out what people meant when they asked that question was, how do you program when you can't see? I don't know why none of them actually said that, but people don't like to bring it up for some reason. So if you did ever ask that question of me and received a deeply unhelpful answer, I hope you're here. So I use a computer that's probably similar to most of yours. I don't have a Braille keyboard or a speech synthesizer or anything like that. I use what's called a screen reader, which is a piece of software that, how do I put it, reads the screen. And it has to do that pretty quickly. So the kinds of voices that a screen reader will come with are very robotic. They're nothing like what you would hear from a Google Assistant or Siri or anything like that, because you have to be intelligible at very high rates. And the more human voices tend to mush the syllables together when you go above 200 words a minute or so. Most blind people with any dignity will use a screen reader at about 400 to 500 words a minute. And you don't need to bother talking to anyone who uses anything under that. So as I understand it, most sighted people use a computer, something like this. They get presented a 2-dimensional graph with pixels that are mapped onto components in an application, and they get to point at those components with a cursor and then click, which sounds wonderful. I get a line, and I get to choose what the line is made up of and where I am on the line. So everything with a screen reader is linear. If you're on a web page, you start at the top left and you work your way down no matter what is on that web page. So if your web page starts with a giant list of navigation links, thank you very much. The screen reader comes with a bunch of ways of navigating through elements. So most of what a screen reader is basically doing is chunking, because you don't want the entire screen read to you. You don't care about the Google Chrome menu bar or anything like that. So you basically have to tell the screen reader what you're interested in. So if you want to go to the next form element, you press F. If you want to go to the next list item, you press I. If you want to go to the next heading, you push H. And there's a whole bunch of keys that you have to memorize, essentially, that will let you navigate a web application if it's been written correctly, which we'll get to. So when I am programming, I like to stick to the command line as much as possible, mostly because any code-based interface for doing code development is written with a mouse user in mind. So there might be elements that are close to each other on the screen that make sense conceptually. But if you're reading it in a linear fashion, you might have to go all the way down the page and back up the other side before you get to it. It just depends on how they've decided to lay it out. And for me, I just find the command line is a bit easier to understand because it's all text. You don't have to worry about images unless Drew's decided to put some ASCII art at the beginning when you log in. So I thought I might also go through a list of, I guess, mistakes is the best way to put it, that people make when they are designing websites. So I was talking before about how you have to navigate, which is very much about what type of element you're talking about. And that means if you're making an accessible website, you have to be very clear about what role every element has. And you should probably try and stick to native elements as much as possible. I was on a website the other day which had an element that started out as an edit box until you started typing, in which case it turned into a select box. And then the elements of that select box weren't actually normal text items, they were radio buttons until you ticked them, in which case they became actual buttons, and if you tried to tick those, it would refresh the page. And the person who designed that is in this audience.
Who is it?
I'm kidding, they died hours ago. So one important thing is heading structure. So with a screen reader, you can basically tell it to go to headings at specific levels. So a lot of websites, I know that there's 2 heading level 2s, there's a heading level 4, and then there's the content I'm actually interested in. So I can skip to the heading at level 4 and then just arrow down a few times until the website changes, which happens all the goddamn time. They just decide to mess with things for no reason. They're not adding new features or anything. And so keeping a coherent, consistent heading structure is really important. YouTube actually messed this up, and as far as I know, haven't fixed it yet. About a week ago, they started putting comment authors in the comment threads at heading level 3. And the related videos are also at heading level 3. And the comments come first, which means if you want to find related videos, you basically have to scroll down the page until you get to something that sounds like a video title and not an author, which is more difficult than it sounds. And then you have to scroll back to the top of that to make sure you're actually finding all the recommended videos, or you're just stuck in a YouTube comment thread, which might be the worst place to be in the world. They actually reckon if you code enough PHP, you get reincarnated as a YouTube comment. So making sure that your headings are well structured would be good. All YouTube would need to do to fix that is have a heading at level 2 that says related videos, so that then you can just go straight to that heading level 2 and then it's all heading level 3s from there. One thing that you would think is really obvious, but that seems to get missed on probably 80% of the websites I visit, is labeling stuff. So labeling buttons, labeling input fields, labeling links. If you don't have a label, it's difficult to know what will happen if you get clicked. And that can be really frustrating. If you're on a website where you're trying to order something and there's 2 buttons right next to each other, one of them is probably reset, one of them is probably place order, and if you mess them up, it's going to be really frustrating. So having labels that make sense, and not just labels like OK, because that can be annoying too, because then you don't know exactly what you're saying OK to. So something like confirm order or place order or something that is actually descriptive of what's going on. Text input fields are a really bad one for this. A lot of the time you'll have a long list of text input fields. The only way sometimes you know when you're logging in somewhere which element is the username and which is the password is you have to type in one and see if a star comes up instead of a letter. And that can be kind of annoying because you can be trying to, if you're trying to access anything quickly, anything that slows you down is really frustrating. So labels have a for attribute, use it. The other thing that I think is important for web design in the early stages is trying to make it as text heavy, I guess is what I'm looking for, as possible. Especially now, websites are really going down an Ajax route where everything's very dynamic. Things are changing all the time. So for example, if you're signing up to some website for something and they say, oh, there's an error, the field that has the error is red. Find the red field and correct the error. Unless you know with the screen reader how to find out what color the element is, that can be quite tedious. And you still have to scan through every element. Like, there shouldn't be an error with my first name, but you never know with these goddamn things. And so you sort of have to scroll through every element where there might be an error and check the color. Is that red? No, it's green or silver or whatever it is. And so you have to go through. So making things as descriptive as possible with text rather than just with colors. This is also applies to things like images as well. I'm not a huge fan of alt text, I'll be completely honest. A lot of the time it's superfluous. Unless the image is really, really relevant to what you're actually talking about on the website, a lot of the time the alt text it'll be something like 2 people sitting in a chair. It's like, okay, I really didn't need to know that there were 2 people in a chair in an image that I can't see. Especially when it says like one of them is wearing a green shirt. I guess the shirt wasn't in error or anything. So having good alt text, if you actually need it, is useful. Don't ever use alt text for an image that's being used for layout purposes, because it's the most frustrating thing when you're trying to read some text and it will say spacer image, spacer image, spacer image. Here's some text, spacer image. Every second or third line. It's really frustrating. So use alt text sparingly, and when you do, make sure that it's describing what's actually important about the image. So like if it's a graph or something, putting in the actual values that are of interest rather than just saying this is a bar graph, which happens at university a lot. That was really frustrating, trying to learn about graph theory in discrete mathematics. It's a lot easier when you know what the graphs are. So I think I can talk about, oh yeah, that's right. There's another thing that I think is important for when you're doing the web design stuff. Like I was saying before, sticking native is really important. So HTML5 is a whole bunch of elements that you can use. A lot of the time you don't need to create your own ones. If you do, there are various technologies around getting those to work with screen readers, but a lot of them don't work cross-platform or cross-browser or anything like that, so you have to be careful about how you apply those techniques. And so a lot of the time it is just easier to use whatever it is that HTML comes bundled with and just use whatever CSS you need on top of that. So for example, use H1, H2, H3 tags. Don't use paragraph text that you then style with CSS to look like H1, H2, H3, because screen readers are going to see that as paragraph text anyway, which means any structuring you have is going to be basically useless. If you look at a website like Wikipedia, for example, they have a very consistent, useful heading structure, which allows you to navigate between sections and subsections really easily and intuitively. And so they've done a pretty good job. There are some interesting technologies that are on the horizon. I'm going to guess many of you don't know how Braille works. It's essentially a binary code made up of dots. And it's got 6 dots or 8 dots depending on what you're working with. So music or computer Braille uses 8 dots, whereas mathematical or literal Braille, which is just like letters and numbers and stuff, uses 6. And Braille is important because it's not just tactile letters. That's how they used to do it back in the 16 or 1700s. It was literally just tactile printed letters on a page. But that doesn't actually translate very well to the tactile sense, because you sort of have to remember what was under your finger 2 seconds ago and then go to the next loop or swirl or whatever it is that's in the letter. And then this is while you're mid-word, by the way. So you're having to do quite a lot of state management in your own head, whereas with Braille, a letter or a contraction will fit under one finger so that you only have to remember what you've read so far. There are Braille displays that are refreshable, so they use these crystals that will pop up to represent a dot. Those currently are just one line, which is fine if you're reading a book or something. but they are bringing out multi-line Braille displays, which are going to have about 5 to 7 lines. They're going to be horrifically expensive for a while, but it's a really exciting possibility for things like GPS navigation. So it would be really cool if you could have like a Braille version of a 2D map, or something like gaming. I can imagine some games that currently are available only to sighted people that could probably be made a bit easier to work with if you've got multiple tactile lines to work with. Yeah, so multi-line Braille displays are interesting because they also will allow you to read code a lot easier, especially if you're dealing with a language like Python where indentation is really important. Indentation you can actually feel it when it's brailled. When it's audio, you sort of have to pretend you're feeling it. So it will say like 2 tabs in, or it used to say space, 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 which is why I've always been a tabs over spaces person. How long was I supposed to talk for?
Didn't you say 20 minutes was going to be really hard to fill?
Yeah. How long's it been?
20 minutes.
Oh, nice.
Go for some questions.
Yeah. Any questions?
Yeah, I've got a question.
Okay.
So are there any tools you can recommend for developers along the lines of like Lighthouse for analyzing web pages and pointing out accessibility issues?
Okay, so there are systems like Lighthouse that will try and take a more automated approach to figuring out where the problems are or potential problems are with accessibility. But it's never going to catch all of them because web developers are always finding new and inventive ways of being annoying. So if you really want to get down and dirty with stuff, the best way is to install a screen reader on your computer. So the one I use is called NVDA. It runs on Windows. It's free and open source and written in Python. So you just have to install that and then close your eyes and forget you have a mouse for a while and see if your website still works.
Any more? Says the mysterious voice from the back of the room.
I mean, most people
Come on, Chris, you might as well use the mic.
I mean, I just found it fascinating. But I mean, if you've got a page with 5,000 lines of code on it, and you need to change one function, just walk us through that process.
Okay. It depends on if I know the file or not. So if I'm doing debugging on some code that I know pretty well, I can usually say with a relatively fair degree of accuracy where I need to make that change as a percentage in the file. So I know that this line I need to change is at around 26% of the way through this file because I know the function starts at 24 and it's a massive long function and it's about 3/4 of the way through that. So you kind of get a vague idea as to where certain lines are, especially because in programming there tend to be functions that you have problems with all the time. So you get to know certain code really well. If it's
Dylan, I'm going to you carry on talking, but I'm going to start doing my tech.
Come this way a little bit,
okay.
and Chandra will switch the laptop over.
Okay.
You carry on talking.
Keep going.
Yeah. If it's a file that I don't know, then things get a little more interesting. Usually, if I'm given a traceback that has a line number, I can just navigate straight to that line. If I've only got a vague idea, like maybe what the function is called, or maybe it's saying X is undefined or something, I can usually just grep for whatever X is in that file, although there's always going to be more than one occurrence of X. Always. It doesn't matter what the variable is called. There's always going to be 50 versions of it and 20 different functions before the one you actually want to get to. So yeah, it's a trial and error thing a lot of the time until you actually get to know the code, and then it's a lot easier.
Are you clapping him off? No, we're going to take one more question. Come on, one more. No, come on. One more. Yes, over here.
Are you like in a Reddit group for people who are blind in code or something? Do you guys all chat about it?
I am a very antisocial person. And that includes online. So no, I'm not. I think I have a Reddit account and I maybe used it once 4 years ago. So it's doing better than my Facebook account.
So you just worked this all out for yourself?
Sorry?
You just worked it all out for yourself?
Yeah, it took a long time and a lot of work, but I was motivated. Cool. Thanks, everyone.
Well, let's give it up for Dylan.
I'm just going to take the mic off you.
Okay.
That was just bloody marvellous, wasn't it? And
Oops.
Dylan Watts, part-time software engineer, full-time comedian. Amazing. You should be on stage more frequently, Dylan. So next up we have Chandra Harrison from Access Advisors. Chandra has 20 plus years of experience in human-computer interaction in New Zealand, the US working for Siemens, and in the UK working for Qualcomm, Vodafone and the BBC. Chandra returned home 6 years ago, bringing a passion for helping people understand and implement digital accessibility and usability. Welcome, Chandra.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Yes. And have you turned me down because I do get very loud? So that's okay. Awesome. Thank you very much. It's incredibly difficult to follow a unicorn. Unfortunately, I would say that Dylan is a very rare beast, a very funny but rare beast, because actually, while there are a lot of people out there who have computer science skills, who have access needs, not a lot of them have jobs. So kudos, Andrew, and congratulations, Dylan, for actually pushing on through. And before I move on, the gentleman who asked about Lighthouse, don't use Lighthouse. Okay, so what I would say is that there is some amazing software that's out there. WebAIM has Wave, and DQ have Axe, and they're both much better. We can chat another time. Okay, so as I said, it's really hard for me to follow a unicorn, and I'm not as funny as Dylan, unfortunately. I happen to be a little bit more, straight up and down. Access Advisors is a company that sort of was founded out of the Blind Foundation about 3 or 4 years ago, when lots and lots of companies were calling them and saying, hey, we know we've got a problem with our website, the heading structure's not good, you've got the wrong labelling, etc., etc. And so the Blind Foundation didn't have anybody to help, so they called in the people who, the tech guys from the Blind Foundation to start up a little consultancy. Fast forward a few years and they realised that there is a real need for this consultancy skill, and hey presto, here's me. So what we basically do is that we help businesses across Aotearoa to be more digitally accessible for all people by raising awareness of access needs and removing barriers and interface design, the sorts of things that Dylan has already talked about. We do lots of different things. We do training, we do consultancy, we do reviews, whatever you need, we pretty much do it. But before we move on, I just wonder if we could have a quick show of hands. How many of you, before tonight, had heard of a screen reader? Awesome, that's really great to know. How many of you have heard of WCAG? Not so great. WCAG is the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. It basically is 78 checkpoints that tell you exactly what Dylan has told you. It's been in the industry for about 20 odd years. So if you are wanting to make sure that your website is accessible, and your software and your mobile apps, then you need to get onto the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. The reason that I'm asking this question is because I've only got 15 minutes and there's so much to cover. Because what I want to talk about is how can you actually build accessibility into the development lifecycle. Now, I'm looking around the room. Most of you are developers or somewhere in the software development space. Many designers. I know there's one, two, couple. Great. I'm going to skip past design and we're going to move straight through to development. But in the meantime, there's a couple of things that I need to clarify for you. One is, I'm talking about digital accessibility, and it's a big topic. I mean, right now, government and certain organisations like NZ Tech are doing lots and lots of really cool work around digital inclusion. Internet New Zealand has a 5-point plan about digital inclusion, but I'm actually talking about removing barriers caused by poor interface design. I'm not talking about infrastructure, I'm not talking about access to devices, I'm not talking about training, I'm talking about once somebody is sitting in front of a computer, how do we remove the barriers so they can use it? So that's one thing, digital accessibility. The next thing is access needs. Access Advisors doesn't talk about disability because as Dylan has pointed out, he has lots of abilities. But what he does also have is an access need. He can't see the screen, so he needs assistive technology. So we talk about access needs, not disabilities. How many people in the room have ever broken an arm? Okay, you've had a temporary access need. How many people in the room have ever nursed a child? You've got a temporary access need in the fact that you're operating one-handed. How many people in the room are parents who have had cognitive impairment because they're exhausted? Right, so we all have access needs. Let's put it clearly here, we all have them. Sensory, physical, cognitive, language. Some of them are permanent, some of them are temporary, and some of them are situational. Really important that you are aware that we are not just talking about the 24% of the population who have a permanent impairment. We're talking about all of you. So, access needs. Touch, sight, hearing, we can all have a permanent, situational or temporary access need. This is from Microsoft. The one in the middle is the settings on a Mac, sorry Dylan, which basically have, there's lots of different settings that you can change and adapt. And these are called the adaptations that a lot of people who have access needs, and I'm not talking about, in Dylan's case, he uses assistive technology. I'm talking about people who don't necessarily need assistive tech, but they do need adaptations. So we need to be aware that every computer has a way of you changing things in it to make it more accessible. And over the far side there, we have a picture of a gentleman who's using what's called a sip and puff controller. So all he can do, he has no control of his hands, he can just basically, with that little straw thing, he can puff to go forward from one interactive element to the next interactive element. He can double puff to enter, and he can sip to go backwards. That's it. So Dylan's point about creating a website with lots and lots of navigational items at the top, it's just as hard for people who are using this kind of tech as well. Lots of different types of assistive tech, don't have time to go into it. The bottom picture is a dynamic Braille display, such as the one that Dylan mentioned. So we've got access needs, we've got assistive tech, and we have adaptations. Important. The situation in New Zealand. Anybody know whether or not you can be like Domino's in New Zealand and get sued for not having an accessible website? Can you be sued in New Zealand currently for having a website that is not accessible? Anybody? No, you cannot. That sucks, right? In the US, legislation has been put in place where any company can be sued. And Domino's is the shining light in this because good old Domino's was sued by a blind gentleman who wanted to order pizza. He couldn't order pizza because it wasn't accessible. He asked Domino's to fix it. They refused, and he dragged them through the muck, kicking and screaming because they said, why should we? How many people are we designing for here? The occasional blind guy. Don't think that's a great idea. So in New Zealand, we don't have that legislation yet. We do have those web content accessibility guidelines I mentioned. They've been around for 20 years. It's a good idea for you to find those and have a little bit of a look. Even though we've got these guidelines and they've been around for 20 years, many businesses do not do a good job. Most businesses in New Zealand don't do a great job. Some are doing better than others. We've got a low awareness and a low level of skill, but it's awesome to see you all here for a meetup like this. That's brilliant. That gives me hope that actually from an accessibility perspective, there's a new wave coming. Our legislation, not good. And I do think that COVID-19 has pushed things forward. And the Accessibility Act, there is a law coming. In fact, hopefully there will be some movement in May. The other thing is that the disability community is actually finding its voice and saying, hey, you need to make this better for us, okay? And I think that's really important too. So, one of the biggest questions that I get asked is, well, how many people are we talking here? You want me to invest money in upgrading my software and my website. Well, how many people are we talking? Well, if we tell you that there's 24% of the New Zealand population has some form of permanent impairment, that's 1.2 million people. Is that worth it? Then there's all of the undiagnosed conditions. There's especially things like Asperger's, autism, dyslexia, cognitive impairments, and access needs, often undiagnosed. Lots and lots of people who have language processing issues, people with dyslexia, English as a second language, all sorts of things. Temporary and situational issues, getting older. This is me. It's a diverse world, and I would argue that actually across the board, every one of you in this room has at some point had an access need when trying to get onto a website. Would anybody like to disagree with me with that? I'm good with an argument. All right. So, what's the reasons why we should be doing accessibility? Dylan is a very good reason why we should be making our websites better. But so is Lachlan. Lachlan has autism, and Lachlan struggles with colour, he struggles with overwhelming content, he struggles with a lot of things. Phil is deaf and blind and is in a motorised wheelchair. He relies entirely on his Braille display. Now, if your website or software or whatever is not programmed properly, he can't use it. And Mandy at the end. Mandy has cerebral palsy. She is non-verbal. She is using what's called a head wand. You can kind of see the little headband that she's got on her head. It's got a little pointer. All she can do, she's got some movement of her head, she can tap on the keys on her keyboard. That's it. They are your motivation. Whenever anybody says to you, why are we doing accessibility? It's these people. But it's also me. Because I broke my arm 2 months ago and I have been operating one-handed and it has been, excuse me, shite. It is the right thing to do. It is the right thing to do, but it's vital for many people. It's vital for all three of these people and Dylan. We have an ageing population, and that ageing population actually has lots of spendy cash because they're carrying on working way past 65. But their eyesight's going, their hearing's going, their vision is going, etc., etc. So we should be thinking about these people. That's part of the market that you're missing out on. We also, does anybody know where the typewriter came from? What instigated the typewriter? It was an access need. In Italy, there was a lovely lady and her boyfriend, and in those days you didn't email or text, you wrote letters. Now she was blind, she couldn't write letters. He was an inventor, so he created the typewriter. This was one of the first pieces of assistive technology where she could type him a letter instead of handwriting it. The other thing is that people will say to me, but accessibility costs a whole lot. I'm hearing an argument that digital startups say it costs too much. Most of the fixes that Dylan was talking about, heading structure, alternative text, labelling, doesn't cost you. If you integrate that into your development process, it doesn't cost you anything more. In fact, if you forget it, send it out into the wild, and that legislation is passed, it's going to cost you a whole lot more. So, some business benefits. Don't be like Domino's. In America, Domino's now has a very bad reputation, and no organisation really can afford that at the moment. We also need to think about the increased revenue, so basically tapping that untapped market, reduced cost of supporting customer service desks, service calls, bricks and mortar stores, improved SEO. A lot of fixes for accessibility actually improve your search engine optimisation. Better customer experience and user experience. If you get that design right for people with access needs, you're improving it for everyone. Improved reputation. Being a valued employer, attracting and retaining socially motivated staff is really important. And staff with access needs, it's really useful. Less risk of being sued when that comes in. And it's also more efficient. Don't know about you, but I am incredibly time poor. Now, as Dylan mentioned, is that it slows you down if the website's not built correctly. Having only one wing meant that I had to cope one-handed. And any website that had a form field that didn't have autocomplete on it really pissed me off, because that meant I had to type out my whole name and my phone number and my email address and my address, whereas if I had autocomplete on, I would have to just enter in the box and click enter. 2 keystrokes instead of hundreds. And it's really a simple thing to do. Security. Would you ignore security when you're developing things? Anybody in this room who would build without considering security from the start? Nobody. Is there anybody who would ignore or deprioritise budget for security? Nobody. Anybody who would develop without using best practice security practices? Anybody who would go live without external security testing? Andrew, naughty. Is there anybody who would send something into the world and not monitor or maintain your security? Anybody? So why the hell are we doing that for accessibility? Security and all of those bits and pieces that we put in there, that's fantastic, but it doesn't stop people from using your products or your services. If you build inaccessible websites and create those barriers, you're stopping people from using your websites. Naughty. So think about this analogy. Anybody seen the double diamond model? I've got a triple diamond model because I just think it's better. Discovery. We can build in accessibility right from the beginning. I know I'm over time already. What's our point? What's our take here? You happy? Discovery is looking at research with people with access needs. We need to include people. I would say that, I'm going to just take a stab. Dylan's going to be a pretty good person to review your code. Define. We need to actually include accessibility as part of our requirements. We need to make sure that we're designing for all, not just the easy ones. So it's really important we think about it at the design stage. We also, Dylan mentioned, using semantic HTML and thinking accessibility first, not mobile first. Think accessibility first. It's much better. And delivery, testing. If you're sending a website out there into the wild without actually doing accessibility testing, you're making it very difficult for a lot of people. And you're going to make it much more expensive for yourself when there are people that you are missing in the market. And monitoring. These are all important bits. I'm going fast. The other thing is that cost increases as you go. So if you get discovery and definition sorted and you start design, if you're thinking about accessibility at the design phase, it costs what it costs. But if you don't think about accessibility until you get to the development phase, then you're having to rework stuff and go back and do lots more iterations to make sure that you've got accessibility designed properly before you code it. So it's increasing the cost. If you wait and don't think about accessibility until you test or deliver, you're increasing the cost 15-fold because it's then got to go all the way back through the process and you've got to be thinking about accessibility at that point. Doesn't cost anything down here, costs lots if we wait. And if we let it out into the wild, it will cost what it 100% redo if we think of it that way. So it's really important for us to think about when we build in accessibility. Dylan, for your benefit, there's a t-shirt, there's a sign here that says, "Friends don't let friends ship inaccessible code." Right? This is the slogan of DQ, who are the people who make X, which is one of the good testers. From a development perspective, it's really important for you to think about accessibility first when you're coding. Make sure that everything is as responsive as possible all the way. Use your accessibility goggles. By that I mean channel Dylan and Mandy and Lachlan and Phil. Think about what they need. Use semantic HTML. Test as you go. Dylan mentioned, just get a screen reader. They're free, whether you're using VoiceOver on your Mac. Don't use that because it's really rubbish. Narrator on a Windows machine, NVDA, there is JAWS, there's all sorts of them out there. NVDA is the best one. Keyboard only. Put away your mouse and test just using a keyboard and see how far you get. Delivery. It's really important to test with assistive tech as a matter of course. What you do need to do is create those robust testing plans that consider accessibility. If you don't, it will get forgotten. Use the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines to guide your testing, but think of the user. You don't just want to be doing checkpoints, you want to think about and channel the people you know. Don't just rely on automated testing. As Dylan mentioned, it's only going to capture between 30 and 60% of the actual problems. There's way more. Include keyboard-only testing, include screen reader testing, multiple devices, different viewports, different zoom levels, different orientation. It's really important to be testing as thoroughly as you can from an accessibility perspective. The other thing is usability testing with people with access needs. We need to be aware that those people who have permanent access needs have a voice. Sometimes it's a really funny voice. I mean, the voice wasn't funny, but you know what I mean. Dylan, that was a very amusing talk. It is important for us to be thinking about those people with permanent access needs, because if we don't listen, we will have issues. Also, once we put things out into the wild, don't forget it. Think about regular monitoring and building in regular checks, whether it's the automated check, it's better than nothing, but building in accessibility maintenance. Make sure that you've got accessibility checks in your backlog. Facilitate feedback, so put a contact form that is programmed correctly, and make sure you've got an accessibility statement. Take care with chatbots. This is a form that has really poorly designed form features and labels, and I am very certain that Dylan would struggle using a screen reader on this one. So, that was so fast, my mouth is very dry. However, I'm sure we can talk more. In summary, there's lots and lots of reasons why accessibility is the right thing to do. Do you all agree? Yes. Awesome. We do need to consider all access needs, not just the blind guy with the screen reader, okay? And we do need to understand assistive tech and the adaptations that are out there, otherwise we can't design for it. Incorporate accessibility from the beginning, because it's the best thing to do. Make it part of your process, not an add-on. It's all of our responsibility. It's not just the developer's responsibility. It's not just the designer's responsibility. It's everybody's responsibility. I think there's a really long way to go for Aotearoa, but I do think we're getting there. And hopefully there will be a shift when we get that accessibility legislation. But whatever you can do right now will make it better. Thank you.
Thanks, Chandra. Love your energy and passion. Couple of quick questions. We'll take two in case the first one's crap. So.
Oh no, not from Chris. I don't want one from Chris.
Not from Chris? Why not?
Go for it, Chris. Go for it.
If you're going to Australia market, what's Australia got for law on accessibility?
Australia does actually have legislation, as does all of the other English-speaking countries in the world. New Zealand is the last country to actually do it. So EU, UK, US, Aussie, everywhere has it. The legislation, we are dragging the chain. We need to do something about this, and we need to do it quick.
Ouch. One more.
I can.
Ask the question. No, ask the question.
How much money did Domino's have to pay?
I actually don't know.
Oh, that was a short one.
That was a really quick question. What I think is that actually the money that they had to pay was much less than the impact of the reputation, because in the US, nothing goes under the radar. You know, this was really public. Don't be like Domino's. Doesn't matter how much
Don't
it
be
costs.
Domino's. That's a good takeaway.
Yeah, don't be like Domino's.
Don't be Domino's.
It's a good takeaway.
There's two comedians in the house tonight.
Okay.
Thank you, Chandra. That was great. And the takeaway for me at a one sentence level is bake it in from the outset.
Yes, please.
Right? Okay. Well, look, let's wrap the evening. Please stick around, and there's more beer. If you don't drink it, we have to send it back. And it's courtesy of AWS. Did I mention that? So drink the AWS beer. That would be great. Thanks so much to Dylan and Chandra for doing a lot of the talking tonight. Thank you all for turning up. Keep an eye open for our next event, beginning of May and September, Tech Summit. See you there. Thanks. Bye.
Close your eyes.